Well, great, good morning. So, as we've been hearing for the last couple of days, the changing economics of renewables and distributed generation are poised to transform the energy landscape globally as we know it. The need for new approaches to planning and operating electricity grids in particular is an acute area that many in this audience are constantly working on and thinking about. While rapid change today in how we plan and operate grids seems like it's occurring everywhere, it has become a defining characteristic of everything that we do, the reality is there are some places in the world where are seeing these challenges even further and more acutely than everywhere else. In particular, places with smaller electricity grids, more remote communities, and islanded systems are seeing some of the challenges that the rest of us will all face even faster and at a larger scale today. Today we're excited to have two panelists who are leading on the front lines of communities in Hawaii and Alaska that are already seeing many of these challenges today. I've asked each of the panelists to introduce themselves and provide a little bit of context, and then we'll follow that with Q&A. Janet, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tim. So I'm the kind of person who has to stand up to talk. I don't know when that happened, but it has happened over the course of my life. I'm thrilled and excited to be here with you all today, and I'm really excited to talk about Alaska and to share the stage with my esteemed colleague from Hawaii, Rick. So what I'd like to do is sort of frame how I got to where I am now, and that informs my thinking about small grids, microgrids, and what's coming next, and what we see as the challenges in that arena. So I'm a chemical engineer, like they said in the intro, in the bio, and I don't want to belabor that too much, but in the last 10 years or so, I've gotten really involved on the small scale side. And it all happened when in 2008, I was elected to the board of directors for the co-op, for the electric co-op in Alaska. And I didn't even know I was a co-op member until I was asked to run, and then I get elected and learned a lot about co-ops. And from that, I was able to really understand a lot more about what happens on the small scale, what are the challenges and unconnected grids. And then further to that, then I was hired as the executive director for Alaska Energy Authority, which not only deals with the connected grid of the rail, what we call the rail belt or the population corridor of Alaska, but also deals with a lot of remote, small communities that are very, very difficult to access, very expensive electricity, and just a lot of challenges that I think all of you people here are the innovators and the creators can help us solve. And so I'm looking to you to help think about how we do some of these things, because I think Alaska is a bit of a test case for the rest of the world as we develop and test some of the theories and practices and the practical matters that are important as you expand out into the lower 48 and beyond into the world. Because I think everybody wants to matter and everybody wants to make a contribution. So let me just frame this really quickly for you with just 3 slides. That's a picture of a transmission line in Cook Inlet, and it's in Anchorage, and it's about a half a mile from my house. And there's actually a lineman in that pole. I don't know if you can see them there on the left pole to me. There is a person there. So that just gives you a flavor of some of the, first of all, I love the picture. And it gives you a flavor of some of the challenges that you see and some of the precariousness, if you will, of some of the opportunities we have. So the next slide is green. So again, one of the biggest opportunities that I had as executive director of Alaska Energy Authority was to really understand the communities and what their needs are in what we call rural Alaska. And this is a busy slide, and the point I want to show here is if you look at the communities around Alaska and think about Alaska, it's not, a lot of people say, well, isn't it cold and dark there? Well, it's cold and dark some of the time. We have also got a rainforest, we've got tundra, we've got more coastline than all of the rest of the United States put together. And a little known fact, we're the farthest east, west, and north state. So if you look, and you can see that the renewable opportunities and the renewable opportunities for integration are huge. We have heat pumps, we have run of river, we have dams, we have all kinds of different hydro. We have wind, We have a lot of biomass. So pretty much a lot of the things you all talk about, we're doing in different parts of state because, drum roll, next slide, it's a really big state. So I like to say, when people say, well, why don't you just get all connected together? And I would say, well, that would be like connecting North Dakota there with Arizona, or maybe we connect, parts eastern Colorado with Georgia. So the point is, it's a large state. It's very diverse in its resources. The communities are extremely diverse as well. If you take a look at the population, and we have, I'll let Rick speak for Hawaii, but as we've been talking about this, it's pretty clear we have the opposite problem that they have, a lot of land mass, very few people. But the people there are engaged, and they're creative, and they want the opportunity to participate in this global revolution of using renewables and contributing to society in the next generations. So about 75% of people live in a very short corridor. You can't really see it on here, but it's south central up about 800 miles. And there are only cooperatives and municipalities for electric utilities there, and that is about 800 installed megawatts of power. If you look at rural Alaska, you'll have over 200 communities with 2,000 people or fewer. Then you have a large other segment of communities that are between 2 and maybe 15,000. And then you're starting cities. Now that's our city level. So a lot of opportunities. And also when you take a look at that, take a look at the economics of it all. If you would say to somebody here, well, I can get you power, I can get you this implementation, it's going to cost you 16 cents a kilowatt hour. Most people say, well, come back when it's 4 or 2. If you say that to somebody in Alaska, they'll say, well, multiply that by 2, and that's, let's see, I should have picked something easier, 32 cents. Wait a minute, I'm paying 60. Yeah, where is it? So I think we're going to get into that, but I think there's some opportunities and challenges that would do well by you. And I hope that you will take a look at some of those things. The other part of what I do, I work with the Cooperative Leadership Network. When I joined the Chugach Electric Board, there were a few progressive folks who were trying to look at renewables and look at where that's going. And that was in 2008. And a group called Enrica is basically the very large, very involved trade association for those cooperatives. And Enrica has moved forward, other cooperatives have moved forward, and they are now really trying to integrate renewables into their systems, whether they be a distribution cooperative or a generation cooperative. They are run by their consumer members, and their consumer members are asking for that. So I think I didn't realize this, and maybe you guys didn't either, or maybe you do, but America's cooperatives power 56% of the nation's land mass. I find that to be astonishing. There are many cooperatives. There are about 400 and some. It's on their distribution cooperatives and their generation transmission cooperatives, but they're small too. And they're looking for solutions that could benefit from a lot of your thinking. So with that, I want to turn it over. That's just to set the landscape of what informs my opinions, and I'll turn it over now to Rick.
Thank you, Janet. And we,
Nope.
I know you want to, there we go, get past it. We just heard a little bit about, why the small grids and isolated grids are important, and I wanted to kind of take a different tack. I think a lot of people heard Hawaii's kind of leading what's going on in the nation in terms of integration of renewables, how important it is to us, and in 3 slides, I wanted to give this audience, and in particular the innovators out here, a snapshot of the way we are operating, and I think in the discussion it'll be a little more about where we think we're going from here. Because even just wandering around yesterday, I saw people with technologies developing new processes, new hardware that are potential solutions in Hawaii. We have a lot of issues to address, and I think a lot of opportunity for people to bring new solutions. So if I look at Hawaii, we are basically 5 major islands, 6 isolated grid systems within it, 4 utility companies, although 3 of those 4 are really under one umbrella parent company. Key is right now we are dependent on imported oil for a significant part of our energy still. That picture at the top is a real picture of the way we get our oil. It shows the risk that we are at for disruption in going forward. Couple of key points about the island in general. There are no interconnections between the islands. So we have grids that range from 5 to a little bit over 1,000 megawatts. Makes them good test beds, makes them areas where you can bring hardware and see both the problems and solutions before they might be seen other places. Over 70% of the energy is on Oahu. That one is going to take some particular care because it's also an island with a little bit less in potential resources. And to a large extent, given what's already been developed, going forward, we're going to see, we are seeing, but we will be seeing very significant continued development of the variable renewable resources, in particular wind and solar. How did we get to where we are today? It basically was with very aggressive policies, net metering policies, tax credits that drove rooftop solar. And I'm going to show a slide that gives an idea of how far we've gone. By 2018, rooftop solar was our largest renewable energy source by energy, not by capacity. I think very unusual compared to a lot of places. If you look at the circuits on our island grids, a very significant number of them, probably over 40%, have greater than 100% of their minimum daytime load in PV capacity on that grid. And many of those grids, 15 or 20%, have up to 250%, and some exceed that. So if it's a 1 megawatt load in the middle of the day, there's up to 2.5 megawatts of PV on those circuits. So in the middle of the day, a significant part of the entire island's energy is flowing back from the circuits into the transmission system and then being redistributed. Hosting capacity is a problem, and we are now at the stage where there is so much distributed and utility scale solar that's going into the grid that storage is going to be a big player going forward. So I picked one island kind of to put some numbers at that, because that's kind of generality. So if I look at Maui, the little box at the left shows, the approximate average load shape. It's a 200 megawatt peak. It's about 180 megawatts in the middle of the day. Tends to dip down lower at night. There's not a lot of industry, so it's residential and hotel load mainly. And if you look at what's on the island today, we have 72 megawatts of wind and 120 megawatts of distributed rooftop photovoltaics that at any instant in time is putting power out onto the grid unmanaged since it's on individual rooftops. There's an additional 75 megawatts of utility scale photovoltaics with 300 megawatt hours of battery storage that is under development, is expected to come online by 2021. So if you compare that 273 megawatts of intermittent renewables relative to a load of anywhere from 85 to 200, it certainly is a significant penetration level, and there are issues that arise due to that. Looking at 1 day of operation back in June of 2018, the light blue line you see at the top is the estimated total utility load. The dark blue line is what the utility is providing from its resources. That blue line includes its thermal generation and approximately and the output from 72 megawatts of wind, which is also considered utility scale. There's a lot that's on here, but the one point I want to make, if I look in the midday, approximately 80 megawatts, 45% of that total load is coming from the rooftop PV. We're estimating that. It says estimated rooftop PV up top because there are no direct measurements of the output of those systems. So the utility is responding to need based on their expectation of what they're going to get from these essentially unmonitored systems that are out there. The other characteristic of this that is starting to occur is both at night due to low load and in the middle of the day, again because of low load due to all the photovoltaics, the utility scale wind is being curtailed somewhat. And this is, at the same time, additional rooftop PV is going on, and there is potential for future wind development. And with that, I want to stop and let us get into the discussion.
Great.
I left my glass up there, but that's okay.
So I think that both of your presentations highlighted some of the unique characteristics of the grids that exist and are operated every day in Hawaii and Alaska. What's relevant for the rest of the U.S., right? If you look out at this audience of entrepreneurs and researchers and innovators that want to have the biggest impact in the most places all over the world, Can you talk a little bit about what are the most relevant pieces of what's happening on the ground today in your communities that you think will transfer?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. I mean, I think basically there's a lot of discussion of getting the high penetration of PV. There are certainly circuits in areas within the U.S. We are isolated grids that now have penetration levels at the capacity level that are approaching or exceeding 100% of the grid. So we are seeing these problems in real time and needing unique solutions to them. And the issues range from, power control, power flow, voltage control, systems modeling in how to manage these very high penetrations of renewables. And it's not theoretical, it's happening. If you go out on our circuits and look, there's a lot of voltage variability. As you saw on that one slide, there's a little bit of curtailment. The utility has actually managed that fairly well, even with the extreme development. But the key point is we are seeing these problems today, and we need solutions to continue to move forward with our plans. The state has very aggressive renewable portfolio goals. We're at about 37%. I think the island of Maui that I showed is at 37% now. But if we want to get to 50, 60, even 100%, we're going to need solutions to continue to actively manage this additional renewables which is going onto our grid.
Janet, and transferable from Alaska?
Sure, and it's quite a bit different, but the problems are still very, very real. I'll take, for instance, the very, very small communities. What happens initially in the very small communities is that solutions will come in. Well, first of all these systems are basically diesel generator systems. And that's the backbone, and that I don't see that going away anytime soon. But what happens when a renewable energy, let's say wind would come in, and somebody would come in and put the wind in, and then something would go wrong. And what typically happens is it's not a seamless, plug-and-play, transparent integration. And when you have a small community, it's very difficult then to get people that are dealing with the difficult system. So they just remove it and junk it behind the school, and then we've lost that opportunity. So I think having well, first of all, there's transport. If it was containerized and containerable and could go on snow machines, there's a plus. But let's say you get it out to the community. It's really important to integrate it successfully and with a very friendly user interface for the system to be of long-term value to the community. So that's one area that I think we could certainly use a lot of help there.
Great. And so Janet just mentioned a couple of the requirements that you would see for innovators and researchers, this audience, to start to really make an impact in Alaska. Rick, how much of that transfers to Hawaii? What are you looking for in terms of what do researchers have to prove or innovators have to show in order to maximize the likelihood that they'll be successful in Hawaii?
I mean, I think at this point there are potential solutions out there. None of them are perfect. We're looking at issues both at the system and circuit level that require new technologies, and a lot of it is around power flow, it's around voltage management, it's around situational awareness to know what's going on in the grid. I showed on that one slide that we're estimating that there's 80 megawatts of photovoltaics coming out at that period of time during the day. That's based on a sampling of sensors that are distributed around the island, but we have very little real-time measurements of what's going out on the grid. So there's a lot of information that's needed, and there are a lot of issues associated with the intermittency and variability that at the levels we're at are manageable, but there are new problems showing up, and a lot of them are around power flow and energy management.
And you mentioned this a little bit, and this was a big piece of our conversations leading up to the panel, is around data. And I wonder if you could each talk a little bit about data needs and the priorities around data.
Again, let me just say it's a little bit different there. Again, it's focusing on just the small communities. The data is it's paramount. To get, first of all, accurate data and to get data in a timely way. And I'm not even talking nanoseconds here, although that would be wonderful. But predictive maintenance is a big issue, and getting data around some ways that we can make sure that the equipment that's out there and deployed continues to run and troubleshoot. And then just data on the efficiency and whether this is a system that's working and providing what we want. So it's pretty basic at the community level, but data and good data is always really, really important.
At the large level, if you look at the Hawaii grids, we're taking inertia off of our systems. In order to make headroom for the renewables, we're either turning systems off or cycling systems and even retiring some of our generation. We're replacing that with systems with inverters where the decisions are made by looking at data, doing some calculation and putting in the model, and then making a decision on what's going to happen to the grid. In order for that to happen, you need accurate, verifiable data. I don't think it's the data and data management itself that's the problem. It's having reasonable cost, verifiably accurate, and fast response sensors. So there's a lot of opportunity for development of technology that will provide more information, give utility better situational awareness. After that, there's a lot of hardware that can be brought in, but effectively, it's all hardware that, somebody used to work with Nick Miller, who used to be at GE. He calls it, we're replacing inertia with brains. And what it means is you've got to make the right decision. As an example, we're running a project where we have a 2 megawatt battery on what's a 4 or 5 megawatt grid to provide contingency reserve. We have to understand what's happening to that grid, make a decision, and put power on that grid in between 50 and 75 milliseconds. And writing the algorithm to getting the battery to do it is actually the relatively easy part. It's making sure that the data we're responding to is accurate, which is leading to more difficulty than what do you do with it after you have it.
Great. So we just have 1 minute left. The last question is, as you walk the showcase floor downstairs, as you walk the halls of this event this week, what are the things you're looking for? What would you say in your communities are the largest technological gaps that you really wish somebody in this audience would fill for you?
Well, actually, I love all of them, and I really want to stand there and talk to everybody and really understand it. But putting that aside, I think anything that is a portable storage or access, or one of the things that is really an issue for us is combining all the systems into one, like combined heat and power, how to integrate something that I can use in the bush that is integratable, reliable, and accurate, and makes use of all the available energy, whether for heat or power. So, but you guys, I think there's some, actually I could think of a lot of reasons to look at all these things because I could think of ways to use the things I'm seeing. So it's very exciting, and I appreciate the showcase.
Rick?
We didn't quite get to what's next in Hawaii, but given all the rooftop solar and other systems that have gone in, probably for the next several years, what we're going to see is large PV systems and storage. The utility has signed agreements for approximately 250 more megawatts of solar with 1,000 megawatts of storage. They have an RFP on the street now for at least as much. We're starting to replace solar and batteries, to replace, actually even to do things like provide reliability on the grid. I think technologies that allow us, it's kind of repeated what I said, but technologies that allow us to know what's going on the grid and look to how to manage these resources. We have a path forward for probably the next 5 or 6 years. It's going to be PV and storage in my mind. There's a lot we understand, there's a lot we don't. What I would say is if you have technology you think is of value, feel free to contact me. If we don't know where to go, we can help put you in touch with other people in Hawaii that either fund projects or even with the utility if you have things that are interested to look for opportunities. There's a lot of very discrete problems that we do not yet have solutions to.
Great. And I'm afraid that is all the time we have. Please join me in thanking our panelists.